Just let me know when you're ready then.
Ready?
Okay, so I'm Rachel Rimmer, for those of you who don't know me, and I did MACA with Emma actually, it finished last year, and I'm a lecturer here in the dance department. And what we thought would be quite nice to do is to video just kind of like a general reflective discussion about MACA. So it's not necessarily, you don't have to feel pressured to go really deep into your practice, and you know, because I'm sure everyone's done enough of that over the past 3 days, but it's more just to think about I've got some sort of prompting questions, but it's should be quite a nice kind of little reflective thing to do, just thinking, I don't know where people are, some people might be at the end, some people halfway through, but perhaps, you know, when you speak you could contextualise that a little bit and then carry on from there. So the first thing that I was just going to kind of open up was the question of what initially attracted you to this MA specifically. So why was it that you chose to come and study here at MMU on MA Contemporary Arts? Anybody?
For me it was the opportunity to develop the theoretical knowledge of, I was quite well practiced within my practice, you know, as a fine artist, and I wanted to be able to develop and become more articulate with, about the theoretical, philosophical side of things. Yeah. And MACA does that quite well, I think.
Well, I suppose it's that integration of theory and practice that this MA does really well.
Because traditional practice doesn't necessarily have a research driver, but where working on MACA, you're working, it's a practical inquiry, isn't it? So the practice is really driven by your research inquiry as well.
I think for me, I originally was applying to do my MA in choreography, and because I'm working full-time, I needed to have something that was not necessarily flexible, but something that was kind of more in the evening days. So I was planning on going to Middlesex, and I got accepted there, but I couldn't really get the full day off work to go down there. But I did my first degree here, and my experience of my first degree sort of opened up, you know, coming back to do the MA. And I was involved with an MA choreography when I was in my first year, but I really enjoyed the contemporary work that goes on here, I think, and from different practitioners that I've worked with since leaving 10 years ago for my first degree, you know, I've said, you know, it's a really good space, and it's a really good sort of hub for contemporary theatre, dance, and for performance. So it was interesting to come back for me at this stage, and for my ideas to kind of change as well, because I came in to do dance, and that was my area, and I'm kind of leaving doing or having done contemporary theatre. So, but I think it was about the teaching for me, and the, like maybe what you said about the kind of thinking artist kind of links, you know, kind of really being able to try and, you know, get to the point where you can actually articulate what you're doing.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah, I think to follow on from what you said with the teaching, I did my first degree here as well, and knowing the teaching staff like I do, and knowing in the way that they know the work that I'd done in my first degree, I was able to start the MA with a little bit of a head start really, rather than spending that first month trying to explain everything you've done at your previous university. There was already that mutual understanding there, so it really gave, the foundation was already in, and I could just get going straight away.
Yeah.
And once that was, you know, that was already there to start with, but it just not, how can I put it, the actual teaching staff itself is so, even the ones that I didn't know so much, like Jane, people like that, the knowledge that they have is such an invaluable resource that you're able to, when I was saying downstairs earlier on, I found doing the whole thing in a year, you do get as much, the more you put in, the more you get out. And the more you can draw upon other people's experiences, not just lecturers, but other students as well, like all yourselves.
Yeah.
I thought that was absolutely brilliant, and that whole network of support exists here, as long as you're willing to dip into it. I thought that was excellent.
Yeah, I think there's something about like the interdisciplinary nature of the MA that I really liked, was that, you know, I'd never been in a seminar with a visual artist or a musician, and just having that, you know, what's common across your disciplines and what's different, and being able to draw upon that, and, you know, possible collaborations and things. And I think that's one thing that's really significant about this MA, you know, that you're not just mixing with people from your own discipline particularly, but it goes wider than that. Yeah.
Yes, I've noticed that it is wider, and yet it's closely knit enough to particularly now we realise it more and more that we are quite a close-knit group, though also interdisciplinary, and I think that's certainly a feature that I enjoy about it, and I think I imagine that would be the case, talking about what motivated and the various things that motivated me to come, but I hoped that it would be something that would be that would have an inclusivity. Having done a first degree at Middlesex when it was a polytechnic, and the BA Performing Arts, which was certainly that, dance, drama and music, but we were all together, and I kind of hoped that that would be the case. And I'd say that the MMU campus, probably MMU Cheshire campus, kind of lends itself to that, because it's somewhere, it's quite it's sort of unit in itself, and it's picturesque and so on, and it has a nice feeling to be here. So yeah, I would say that I would agree, and I think that it has been a quality that I've enjoyed. Increasingly, you know, the weekly seminars, the sharing of presentations and so on and so forth, and you're moving towards understanding that you're all going through a similar process, but in distinct ways.
Yeah.
There's a collegiate feel here, isn't there?
Yeah, I think
It's
there
not,
is.
the campus it is a small campus, and so
Yeah.
you get to know each other
Mm.
and specific areas quite well,
Yeah.
whereas other more urban campuses are quite disjointed, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great to have everything in one space, isn't it? Everything's kind of quite easily accessible. And just to move on from that then, so I guess this is quite relevant now. Just thinking about the showcases, so the MACA showcases when you present your work, and perhaps if anybody has any comments about that experience, that could be based on last year or this year, or you know, what has that brought for you as an artist? What has it allowed you to do? How has it allowed you to develop?
I think this is another point where the interdisciplinarity comes in, whereas you although there's elements of sharing, like Tim just said, throughout your praxis, you're still focused upon your main discipline.
Yeah.
And that stays the same all the way through until, as we were saying before, that question time at the end. And then you're getting points of view from people that are experts in their disciplines, and it gives you that insight after that, after your performances, of thinking things that you, in ways that you wouldn't have considered before. And, you know, for me, it was things like lighting and stuff like that, which as a musician is not something generally I have to worry about. Someone else does that.
Yeah.
You know, and it was, so feedback from those moments, I thought has been absolutely fantastic, and taking study onto a further level, that's going to be priceless feedback, really. And again, being able to draw upon that expertise.
Yeah.
I think we were saying this earlier downstairs, with the with the exhibit of the documentation that I did today, you know, the main kind of piece was the performance piece that happened in, you know, the end of May for me. What was interesting for me today was that, you know, other people who didn't see the actual performance went into the exhibition of the documentation in the space today and came out of that and came to me later and said, you know, they really got something from it and felt something from it and enjoyed looking at that. And I think for me, as a theatre maker, you put a lot of time, effort and energy into the actual performance and the documentation, if you do it, or, you know, which everybody does in their own way, but, you know, the importance of that, I think, and the importance of opening that up and having the trace of that performance, you know, in a space, or just having it so that it can be shared, you know, in a difference, because that performance is done now. And other than the video of it, you know, you're not going to see it again. But for me, I think it's a kind of a realization of actually these parts that have been documented can work on the, you know, as a collective in a different space, in a complete, you know, in not in Birmingham, up in Crewe or wherever else, and can stand on their own as an experiential sort of thing. So that was interesting, I think, for me. I don't know if I worked out I don't know. I think it's hard to work out what to document. I think that was something that was quite difficult to get right. You know, what do you want in time? And obviously, there's parts of it that we have to exhibit and present our documentation. But I think it's hard to work out what that is. I think it might have been easier for me this time to do my performance 2.5 weeks ago, and to have that distance between the actual performance and then the showing of the documentation, because there was much more of a selective process of what am I actually going to show and how is that going to really capture the essence of the performance. And I think if you're doing it all in one day, where you've got the performance in this space and, you know, a couple of plinths and your stuff outside, it can, you know, I don't know, I think it's quite hard to kind of work out what it is to present. So for me, I've got more of an idea now of what that means.
Yes, that's part of the challenge, isn't it? Is what best articulates what it is that I'm trying to say or do. And I think that for me was like a massive shift when I started this MA was, oh, so I don't have to just present a performance. You know, oh, I can, the stuff that I do in the studio, people are actually interested in that, you know, and that kind of thing. And yeah, for me, by my second year, it was actually almost kind of liberating to know that I didn't have to kind of put myself under that pressure to try to communicate all this stuff through just one mode, through like one medium, which I suppose for me would be the body, but I could draw upon other ways of, you know, other things to help me do that. So.
But in terms of kind of, I think for your development as an artist and as a practitioner, you know, moving forward, that way of having that documentation is going to be much easier for me to say to somebody, right, this is what I do, give me some money for it, you know, here's some, you know, some, this is a performance that I've done which has been documented in this way, you know, as a way of self-promotion, you know, or promotion or to gain future work or to collaborate with different projects. It's a much kind of, you know, I don't know how I would have, I think going through this course, I would be much more comfortable in sort of putting that together, rather than just, you know, filling out a proposal and saying, oh, give me some money for it, or let's do this, you know, where you can actually tangibly put this stuff together, and you can really give a good sense of your work without them actually seeing any of it. You know, we're just seeing snippets and documentation, so I think that's really useful.
Yeah, it's good practice for them. kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's just like trying to extract that process, isn't it? And I think for me, when I first came and said what I was going to do, like, I'm going to reconstruct this, at the end there's going to be a performance. Well, that's not enough. Well, why isn't it enough? And I was like, you had to get that into your head, but I think it's only right now that I realise, oh, well, look at what I've actually done and look what I've actually informed people of, rather than just going, well, there you go, went from this to this, but how did you do that? I think that's really...
I think you discover a lot about yourself as an
Yeah.
artist.
And knowing those choices, you
As
can
a
then
musician,
blame them and
I've
manipulate.
always been orientated with the end product and the audience. I'm not worried about how I get there with the process. And going through the practice as research and having to think about the process and then present the process, you find out a lot about yourself and how you work, which is really, really interesting. And I found that although it was very intuitive, I had to find out how that intuition worked and where. And although a lot of the processes I'm involved in are internalised, and I make things up without using notes or writing down anything. So it was quite, for me, very, very difficult to document because you couldn't video anything or photograph anything or print anything out because there wasn't anything. You still have to present what's going on as a process, and it was really interesting to try and find a way that would present that process.
Did you manage to do that?
You'd have to ask people who saw the presentation, but I did find ways that linked in with the project. I tried to find a unique way that presented me as a person as well as an artist, not just the project itself, but where I was coming from and how I worked through artwork.
Makes me think, hearing you talk yesterday about your dream from 5, which related to the first praxis with a smaller instrument. In fact, the dream was the larger instrument, and that was what came to fruition. And it makes me think a little bit about, probably because Joanne, external moderator, has been here, and I remember reading in her the chapter in Baz Kershaw about her PhD, Partly Cloudy, Chance of Rain, and she talks about an early starting point, which is a drive in the car, you know, and so how these seemingly quite small, the everyday things have links through to obviously huge areas of study and rigor and involvement, but there's something actually quite, you know, small, seemingly small there, and that's those moments are pertinent to the process of being in this state of flux and development, where I think I'm going to a goal, but actually I'm noticing that if I keep my eyes open and my ears open, it's the stuff that's happening either side of that that becomes important. It starts to take on a world, a life of its own, and quite rightly so, it becomes the inquiry. Still getting there, I think. Not there yet with that concept, but it's developing.
Yeah. Has it changed? Has it changed the way that you look at art? Maybe I should ask that question again. Thank you. Yeah.
That'll be interesting.
I might have to go as well in a minute.
Yeah. Maybe just 5 more minutes.
Oh yeah, we're all right.
I was just going to say, has it changed at all the way that you look at art, or do you now see stuff and want more? Or because I noticed that I saw something recently and thought, oh, I could really do with something here to help me with this, you know, to help me contextualize it, and then there was like a whole conversation about, oh, but why do you need that? You know, the art, it should speak for itself, and you shouldn't always have to rely upon. It's kind of an interesting question, I suppose.
I think we're just working in a different context, aren't we?
Yeah.
Because we are working within academia, so
Yeah.
that's why it doesn't speak for itself, because we're looking to make a contribution.
Yeah.
Not just an academic contribution, not purely an aesthetic.
Yeah, I was faced with that question after I did my Praxis 1 on Tuesday night. I produced an image by the end of it, and Jane asked me in my feedback, did I feel that image would stand on its own? And I said no, but I know that I've produced things similarly before doing this course, and I would have said, well, yeah, of course it stands on its own, of course it does. Like, I think a question like that would have offended me probably then, but now my answer was no, it can't be on its own, it has to be with everything.
It's a paradigm shift, isn't it, I suppose?
Yeah, it just changes your perspective on the process and how important the process actually is, because it is something you don't really consider until you put it into an academic context, whereas the product feels like it's the epicenter of everything, but actually it's not.
And sometimes they can work both ways. They can work just as work very successfully, but there is that bit more to them as well. There's that grounding.
I think
Very
the artist's notebook, that's kind of been interesting for me as a I don't know, I think as a choreographer you kind of have a choreographic notebook or whatever you want to call it, but it's mainly kind of ideas, scribbles, floor plans, stick men, and as a director, with the director's kind of hat on, it's again stage plans and just notes and all that kind of stuff. But I think from working and looking at visual artists books and looking at how creative some of those have been in last year's presentations, and looking at some of Lisa's scores and some of her some of the work from last year, that's been interesting for me to try and place my stuff. And I think for the first year I kind of thought, well, I have to do one of these creative colourful books with some stuff in, but I really found it really meditative, just to kind of, because I got so involved with the creating of the performance and everything else, and editing, reams and reams of video and get, till your eyes fall out. So it was really nice to kind of indulge into this book, and looking back on my art practice 1 books that I presented, they're beautiful, just in their own kind of right, as little kind of mementos of that kind of, I don't know, that time. But that was quite interesting for me, finding a way through that. And are they relevant, or are they, I don't know. Interesting. Still thinking about that.
I wonder whether the makeup of the MA program, MA Contemporary Arts, in some ways, I'm sure it is. It's by design. It replicates what's important in contemporary art, or it aspires to do that. It seems that we are all required through our developing inquiry and understanding what it means to have an inquiry beyond just making a piece of work, to actually understanding ourselves in relation to that work, in relation to the field and what's happening in the field. And so I'm starting to get a sense of historical perspective. What's happened, what has happened over the last 50 years, and that's very important. And understanding the indebtedness that dance has to visual arts, that theatre has to dance, that the referencing of postmodernism and so on. So all of this field and the network and matrix of interdependent elements is fascinating, and I'd say that 1 year is quite a tight schedule to fit that gestation into, but I recognise at the same time that, as Martin Blaine says, it never stops. It just keeps going. So that's okay. I can chill and just go, time. We've started something.
I think I needed it to be over 2 years, I think, for me. Just because of work commitments and everything else. But I think the first year for me was very much about experimenting with different genres, different medium. I'm working out myself really what I wanted to do, or where I wanted to kind of place myself in it all. So the first year for me was quite good in the first, so I could just work out what it was I wanted to do, and then by the start of the second year really kind of focus on it. I suppose if you had more of an idea of what you wanted.
I did.
When you came in.
I did, and I knew that I had to sort of, as they say, hit the ground running.
Get on it, yeah.
But then the danger with that is one sort of is trying to sort of, right, well, it's all sorted in a way, and here we go, and action. Not so fast. There's some shifts have to happen.
Just some breathing space.
Yeah.
Of course, it pushes you to do that though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Really just push you to reflect on, what it is that you're doing and to modify as you go.
So sort of look back to October and November and think, oh yeah, there was a sort of ratcheting of change at certain points. So yeah, so things you deal with the time you've got. I think you make it work.
Yeah.
I found the challenge was all the way through though, to keep doing that, to keep looking back all the way through, right up until the end, which is one of the strengths, I suppose, of teaching staff.
Yeah.
That they do that.
And
As difficult as it is,
Yeah.
it is a good thing, I think.
As well, that's where the documentation becomes really useful, because it's kind of forcing you to do that, isn't it? Forcing you to reflect and I just remember sometimes, because I was keeping this blog, I'd go to write in it and just be like, I don't have anything else to say, but if you just make yourself do it, it's amazing what comes out, really,
Kind of keeps your engagement, doesn't it? Kind of keeps you involved throughout. It's nice. But then that was interesting. Just the different modes of writing and the different ways of putting that. I think I used a blog, and some of it was very kind of analytical and very kind of related to my kind of framework and critical reading, and others of it was just lists of things and streams of thought, and it was just nice to have that, just something else. I know it's odd, but when you're working and you've got your lives and everything else going on, just to kind of be able to put all of your ideas down somewhere, even if it's in just a kind of stream or a rant, it's kind of there then and out in the ether, and then you can start to work it out. For me, that kind of helped.
It helps other people to access the process as well, doesn't it? When it comes to sharing that blog, then it's it gives the viewer a different kind of access point that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to say I was struck by, we were talking in Nina's this morning about the idea of, Gavin asked the question, what if you were not to use Laban notation, what would it be like to use a virtual form of documentation? How would that be? And you answered, you addressed the question. I was thinking about yours with the intertextual kind of the narrative, spoken narrative, but also there was a visual and there was sound. And I was thinking, God, it's really fascinating how documentation just takes it into a completely different realm. A blog does that, and you put it out there, and then this situation that you've been in with your what's developed because of the form that you're working in. It takes its own momentum in a way. So I mean that's been revelatory. It's certainly been very, very constructive, seeing how different forms are used, and it's not just a different way of saying it. The whole thing becomes new in itself. Something else is created.
Yeah, that was interesting from last year. Looking at your work and Lisa's, just seeing how other dancers notate and score their movement, and I really just wanted to pick them up and kind of put Lisa's headphones on and try and move with that. You could give another group of dancers your scores or your haven't got a clue how to use them, and they would create something completely different. And that's really interesting.
That's what's
just
great about the
looking-
showcases, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah.
Opportunities
Just to really kind of
access.
see everybody's work. I think I'd like them to be a bit longer.
Yeah.
But
Can I ask a question of Emma? Just thinking about where you're at now, you're completing your first year, more or less, and I've had a chance to hear a presentation a few weeks ago,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
really interesting. How are you? I mean, you have carried straight on. How has that been for you this year?
Well, the Masters, it's a research preparation Masters, isn't it, the MACA? But preparation for the PhD. I'm just coming to the end of the first year PhD.
Vibrating.
And I think I've been well prepared for, like you said, hitting the ground running. But at the same time, the challenges are the same, you know. So I now feel like I'm at the end, as I did at the end of the first year of the MACA. I'm still, where it's a 3-year course and it's practice as research. So I'm still forming my research questions. The inquiry is still kind of being shaped. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do it without MACA.
And
And I wouldn't have
a
wanted to.
continuation of your ideas that
it's
you kind of
moved forward.
explored in your second year?
Yeah, it's moved directly on from MACA. I mean, I came in as a visual artist, stroke live artist, and I worked through and developed a curatorial practice, and so now I'm working as an artist, curator, researcher, and it's a kind of hybrid practice, which wouldn't have existed without MACA. So,
Thank you very much. Well,
That's
with
all right.
the